welcome. My name is Malcolm Saunders from the Light Cellar, and I have with me on the call Yarrow Willard of Harmonic Arts. Okay, right on. And our theme here is recreating your relationship to food. We're going to chat with Yarrow about his journey with food, with herbs, with nutrition, health, and I think you're going to learn a lot from this conversation. So let's start with first question, Yarrow. What are you drinking?
Well, I got a big frosty cup of actually steamy cup of
Yeah.
herbal concoction. I've been playing with a few new formulas, so this is quite a upgraded elixir type drink. No sweetener. I've been trying to get off of like a honey base, even though I love that kind of fat and honey sometimes in drinks. But right now I've been playing with the turmeric golden milk. So this has got there's a little bit of coconut milk in here, but it's also turmeric, ginger, black pepper, lucuma. And then I've upgraded that with this kind of sacred masculine blend that I've been playing with, which is all the like kind of Hishu Wu, Romania, Eleuthero, pine pollen, nettle root, kind of herbs. So there's about 10 or 12 different herbs in here. And I think of this as like the modern day kind of multivitamin for me anyway.
Right, totally. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So that's you now. You're creating these amazing drinks. You're always kind of innovating and evolving. And, just to give some context, if you're listening to this, any time of year, you and I were having this conversation in, end of January here. So obviously some very kind of seasonally appropriate herbs and spices.
For sure. Tonic roots and anti-inflammatory warming herbs is what I'm drinking now.
Yeah, for sure. So, this is who you are now. This is, where you're at on your journey. And a lot of people look up to you and respect you for the knowledge that you have. And you're a great teacher. So thanks for being who you are in this world. What I wanted to ask you is, obviously, it hasn't always been this way. Like, what's your journey with food, with herbs, with nutrition, with health? What's it been like? Where did it start? And maybe I'll just kind of, start it off and segue that you and we've known each other since we were probably like 15 or 16. Is that, I think, around that time?
It's true. Since we were youngins, after school up to no good, downtown Calgary.
That's right. Yeah. And,
we were up to good.
Well, we were totally up to good. Yeah, we were, like drumming in the park, and that was our first initial connection was music. And although I believe that you and I were into mushrooms at that time, for me there was really only one type of mushroom that I was actually really into. Had no idea about the rest. So first it was magic mushrooms. Well, I'll just call that out. And then in high school, actually, my mom, as a birthday gift, she had given me a shiitake like growing log. So that was the first time I had grown my own mushrooms. She just got it at, I can't remember what store, way back when. And I grew my own shiitakes. I would occasionally go get, like button mushrooms, portobellos from the health food store, but really had no idea, no awareness. And I remember when I first met you, I first heard this word, reishi. And, you and your dad were popping these little reishi pills out of this, blue bottle from Wild Rose. And, it was a completely new world to me. And, I hadn't yet really begun my health journey at all. It was not in my awareness. Again, I was just kind of the hippie on the street, and that's how you and I met and jammed on music. And you seem to already have a little bit of kind of exposure to it, probably naturally through your dad. So.
Well, I was in a way raised by herbalists. My mom was the manager of the big health food store in town, Community Natural Foods at the time, all through my childhood. So, the first drink that I had that I remember is soy milk. And I was like, no! This was back when soy milk was bad, like when they hadn't realized how undigestible soy products can really be. And so
I remember that. Yeah, I remember probably around the first time I met you, I had become vegetarian, but I was like, I was like terrible vegetarian. I had no idea what I was doing. The first thing I did was like, all right, well, if you're a vegetarian, you got to drink soy milk. And I went, and it wasn't in the grocery stores, right? At that time, like I didn't even shop at the health food stores. I didn't even know that was. So I went to like the Chinese market and found the soy milk and was, greatly shocked and challenged by the flavor. I don't think I kept that up. It wasn't until a few years later I got into rice milk. I'm sure you remember all those kinds of products.
Well, the rice milk and the almond milk are kind of upgrades, but the rice milk was so thin. It's just like it's like water. Like really, I paid for this. I really would rather drink water.
Yeah, like it's probably it's almost as if they made it out of the the rice rinse water, as they're like rinsing
Yeah,
rice before they cook it, just like this watery starch.
yeah. I mean, like such a minimal amount of protein. Yeah, it's not much nourishment, but it's our culture is really interesting the way we adopt things. Like I make fun of it all the time these days with the soy bacon culture and the gluten-free donuts and the like. But we adopt this idea. We want this image of milk, for example, and
Right.
so like even now, like I've got a bit of coconut milk in here, and it's just because it's creamy and rich, and there's something nourishing about that creamy rich. That's what people love milk, despite all of the downfalls and the like pus and blood, and I don't want to go that far into that, but there are issues with the dairy industry. There are issues with drinking, the lactation of another animal to feed the human organism.
Right.
But creamy, delicious, kind of saturating nourishment is a huge piece of what we crave, and it's biologically hardwired into us.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'll maybe just interject here, and this is what I love about our conversation. It's gonna go here, there, and everywhere. It's gonna be a lot of fun and a lot of learning for anyone listening. And so when I mentioned when I did become that vegetarian years ago, I got into all those kinds of that theory and the propaganda around how dark and evil and bad animal foods are. And really, what I've come to realize over the years, it's not a question of plants versus animals, because that's what it was in my mind for such a long
Mm.
time, right? It was like animal food's bad, plant food's good. But as I kind of grew and through my journey, recreating that relationship and became a little bit wiser, it's not black and white, these two different kinds of foods. It's actually the industries they come from, right? It's
Yeah,
industrial, large scale, factory farmed, plants, animals versus small scale, local, heritage, heirloom, all
totally.
that stuff, right? So, milk can be a great choice, and it's been proven throughout time, throughout history, that humans have utilized it as a food source, thrived off of it, as
For
long as
sure.
it's sourced well, the animals are cared for, et cetera, prepared well. And that's a great, kind of hint back to soy, right? It's like, milk very often was cultured, it was fermented, it had bacteria in it,
Mhm.
it had enzymes in it, completely different than the milk off the grocery store, which as a vegetarian, as a vegan, you hear has all these evils and dangers and blood and pus. And it's like, yeah, but that's one form of milk versus,
Well,
what milk is and can
for
be.
sure.
And same with soy, right?
It,
Well, there's soybeans, and then there's soy milk, tofu, bacon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these forms we've
yeah.
turned it into, which really are completely inedible. So
And I like to look to. I've been playing with this concept of ancient futures and like how do we take ancient knowledge and bring it into a future of our health. And a big one with soy, both soy and milk. Like, well, let's start with milk for example. In Ayurvedic medicine, it was like sacred. The sacred cow, brought
right,
so much nourishment to the family, and it was the most prized possession was their cow, and it wasn't because they didn't eat meat. They weren't eating the cow. It
right,
was it was the milk and the cultured cheese and the bounty that this gave us. And so, yeah, if we look at that ancient way in which animals were revered by these cultures as the givers of health and life,
yeah,
then we can see the benefits of that. Soy, we look at the history of that, and the Chinese really brought soy in, but they didn't drink soy milk.
no,
They fed soy to the pigs and ate the pigs. They fed soy, they fermented it and made tofus. They made tempehs, right? They broke it down.
yeah,
They realized it was a high protein bean, but they fed it to animals to eat those to process it, or
right.
found a way to break down that protein so it was more bioavailable. Whereas soy milk is so bad for us. 80% of us actually have allergies to soy products.
For sure. Or as our good friend Denis Manser, he always likes to share the the story if a Japanese man has been unfaithful to his wife, his wife will start, unbeknownst to him, feeding him straight up soybeans to basically like lower his libido and make him impotent.
It's like, oh no. Yeah, yeah. Well, I know, some of you on this might not know Danny, but he definitely is a male vigor kind of guy. It's like, how do we increase the male potency?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I can see that as be the hardest thing. Like, no, don't feed me estrogenics.
For sure. Yeah. So no, it's a great idea. I mean, when you're talking about this idea of ancient health and bringing it into the future, right? We often miss, and that's one of the things I love about Denis. Like he's so into like history and the myths and the legends, and
Mm.
like really looking at cultures. And it's a great way for us to be able to navigate our our foodscape now and navigate the world of food and nutrition. Is like let's look back in the past, but don't skim over it. Don't just go, oh well, the Japanese ate soy,
Totally.
so let's eat soy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks in between. Like we got to have it in context as well.
Yeah, this is a big concern in the Western world is really the adoption of ideas without the cultural context. And we see that over and over again. We're kind of homogenizing the world in that sense. Like even if I go on the internet and look up like plant medicine, everywhere I see disclaimers continually, like, oh,
Right.
don't use this unless you're under a practitioner. This might have been used that way, but now it's dangerous. There's a
Right.
lot of fear around like I guess experimentation and learning, and then also looking back. Yes, there's problems if we don't use it in cultural context in that way. So
Right.
learning that kind of cultural context, I think that's really important, and it's being lost right now in a huge way, and people are becoming less they're less understanding of how they might want to use these things in that sense. So
Yeah. No. Totally. I've been experimenting with like stand-up comedy and like joke writing, and it reminds me of something I was just working on, and I'm just in like the very beginning, like idea stage. But I wanted to like create a little like joke set around this idea of just exactly what we're talking about, how people will take things out of context. So, it happens with herbs, it happens with like superfoods, like the newest, latest, greatest superfood. It's like shown to
yeah,
have like A vitamin, completely undigestible fiber. Like okay, there can be these scientific analysis of certain foods that are then like blown up and taken out of proportion.
yeah.
But you actually look back and it was like, well, that was a survival food, right? It was,
Totally. Or like flown across the country, freeze dried, and brought down to its extract powder, and it's almost as good as rose hips.
right.
It's like, oh, right. There's something that grows here.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, cultural wisdom, it's there. It's served us throughout time. And again, I think that comes back to my point of like, the big dividing line of where we've gone off kind of as a species, as humans, and really we've become confused about food and nutrition because of industrialization. I think, like that's the big kind of line
Yeah,
drawn in the sand where, from that point on, when we took things out of context, out of their small, local, traditional scale, and we, soy again, another great example.
totally.
It's like, mass grown soy, hectares and hectares and hectares of monocropping that one food, and especially with the GMO and everything that's going on with it, that is not environmentally friendly. That's not, pro
No.
health.
Yeah.
And again, that industrialization is really where we're at, and I think it's kind of again going back to more ancient ways, but in a way that moves us forward as well.
For sure. Because there are benefits and deterrents to both aspects of that story. Like
Yeah,
like I think of even just like people, this idea of these grassroots hippies trying to go back to the land and live off grid.
right.
Well, that's not totally ideal either. Like if you want to be an influencer or make some kind of difference in the world, you can't just check out either and live in your
Yeah,
permaculture design utopia and think that you're making the planet a better place. In some ways, like there's a mix
yeah,
there where we can't let go of this new, but we need to find new ways to infuse the old and the new, and that's where I think we're headed.
yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, everyone's
So
got their own role, and power to that person that does live off grid. But I think you
totally.
and I, we've recognized. I mean, our early days, you and I followed a similar path of like a lot of like hitchhiking around, just kind of like traveling, exploring. I spent a number of years just kind of in meditation and yoga, like retreat centers, and it was good in that early phase of my life to kind of really get clear, work
Mhm.
on myself, etc. But there became a point where it's like, okay, I felt this shift coming. It's like, okay, I need to be more active in the world. There's that saying of like yoga on the mat and yoga off the mat, right? It's like you can be all wonderful and peaceful on the mat, but as soon as you get out into traffic, like you
Like,
curse everyone, and right? It's like,
yeah,
yeah, be more that active, proactive force in the world. And yeah, I mean, It's been a
Well,
pleasure to kind of keep that connection with you, and be in the world of business, that is for good, right? And I love what you do,
oh,
bringing herbs from all around the world and different traditions and the knowledge that goes with them, to people, making it accessible.
for sure. And it's interesting because what you say about like yoga off the mat and yoga on the mat, and then like cultural understandings and appropriations of food versus like use, it's all of that sort of stems to this level of alignment, right? Like how do
Right.
we become more in tune and more aligned and more understanding of what's going on? Like we've disassociated from our food source. We've disassociated from our meditation practice, even in that sense too, from our
Yeah.
awareness. We might have this place where, and I'm speaking for myself and for the way I see, world, is we have these ideas and this way of like showing up. Like, yes, we want to live in this peaceful, healthy, holistic way, but then in action, how do we turn that in? That's where the real power is, I think, is full alignment and awareness. And I'd love to see people start to become more aware of their own choices in their food in that way and how it affects the body. I think it's so easy to get into this industrial food because we're so disassociated with how it even affects our body. People don't realize the inflammation in their body or the heavy breathing or the high blood sugar, low crash kind of feeling. They just think it's normal because
Right.
we're not in tune. And so I think that might be the revolution I'm hoping to see in the world.
Yeah.
It's a
No.
little more
Totally.
attunement.
For sure, yeah, and I think you're absolutely correct. Because we're disconnected with our environment, just because we're connected with our food, it ultimately stems back to a disconnection with ourselves and our body. So, what do you think is kind of the one? And probably this is the wrong question to ask, but because there probably isn't one next step for everyone that's universal. But what's a good direction for people to be able to make those steps? How can we retune to ourselves and our body?
Do you mean the magic bullet? Right. Let's see.
Yeah,
What is the
exactly.
magic bullet? That's an allopathic question. Let me think. Well, there's one thing that can fix the world, and it's you. But yeah, I mean, I think to me, the biggest thing we can do is learn how to kind of I think we can navigate our own perceptive and proprioceptive behavioral patterns and start to learn how to like listen to our bodies better.
Right.
There's only one person who knows what's best for me, and so the one thing we can do is learn how to listen to who we are, in that sense, and then those decisions become more intuitive. Be accountable to our actions, be aware of the repercussions of what we do in life. Then also look and become a time piercer in our own lives of like go back into our history and be like, wow, look, that action that I did there turned into this. How can I speak to that earlier part of myself? How can I speak to the future part of myself that knows the type of person I'm going to become and I'm trying to become now so that I can get there? So learning to become in tune with not just like the perception of what's happening around us, but who we actually are. And that may
Right.
seem sort of esoteric and theological or whatever, but I really feel like only one person is the healer, and that is the inner guide. All the rest is just content, information, distraction, news, babble, other people's opinions, including mine.
Yeah.
But um, it's learning to be that for yourself. And so that does stem from that, from us, and as you're speaking, early years of traveling and kind of discovering the world. I invite anyone who's curious about things to get out and know it and learn it, but don't be too influenced in a place where you don't have your own barometer as keeping you in check. That's one part of the greatest newest superfood, the greatest newest cleanse, the trend is that we get out of our body into that versus how does this really fit when I taste it, when I
Right.
smell it, I see it, when I understand where it comes from, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think out of ideology, right? Whether that's our own ideas,
Mm-hmm.
someone else's ideas, and really into experience. And yeah, I think that's the future of nutrition. Actually, where the whole movement is going is this idea of intuitive eating. And it
Mm.
definitely it's a journey and a process to get there. And yeah, I love how
Yeah.
you're saying like check in with yourself, your ancient self, your future self, and really kind of analyze. And what brought up, kind of a thought brought up for me here, I'd love for you to kind of explain on. Both you and I have spent some time with Stephen Herod Buhner, been to his workshops, and
Mm.
he's
Love
he's
him.
a prolific writer, amazing books. Check him out, look him up online. Absolutely go grab one of his books on a wide variety of topics. So very knowledgeable. He's been in this industry. He's been a herbalist. He's been a healer for decades. And what really stuck out, so just as much as we're saying, it's all about the individual path, the individual journey, which absolutely it is. And, it begins and ends with you. He made an interesting point, and I'd love for you maybe to speak on it, is, he went through a period, I believe it was when he had pneumonia or something like that. And he had mentioned that, every great herbalist, every great healer, and we're speaking to you. I mean, you are your own greatest herbalist. You are your own greatest healer. What's that?
But you need someone to support, right?
Right, exactly. And this is what he was saying. He's like, I've been in this industry for decades, and it was humbling to him. And he almost, I can't remember, you might remember his statement exactly, but something like, at some point in your life, you're going to go through a process. You're going to go through, albeit, let's say, at a tragedy, potentially, crisis of health, where you're going to need to reach out. And I know for me, totally. As much as I got stuck in lots of, kind of guru worship or ideologies along my path, the voices of others was really helpful, but ultimately I had to come back to myself. So there's kind of both those dynamics. Can you speak to that?
For sure. Yes, for sure. And I would say a couple of things. One is that it takes a village to raise a person. Right. First off, is that there is no, we are social creatures, and we require this social construct in order to evolve ourselves. Without it, we wouldn't be able to evolve, grow, find our own imbalances. And I would just even use, I know I will jump onto that, but my own partnership with my partner, the amount I've learned about who I am through her eyes is so much more invaluable than if I just was trying to learn who I was through, going to India and meditating the whole time and going to the top of the mountain and being with the Buddhist and the priest. And I might learn totally new things about myself, but the reflection from my partner who knows me intimately and is able to show that to me was huge. Yeah. Other aspects of that is every healer I've ever met usually ends up with some kind of dis-ease, imbalance issue. One, they attract and take on other people's issues, which can be challenging, and that's probably the first step if you're going to be a herbalist, doctor, healer, practitioner of any kind, is to learn how to have really good boundaries and clear I'm here of service and not taking on what's wrong. And two is that because these people know so much about health, their own dogmas end up influencing, their own biases end up influencing that, and something creeps up on them all the time. My dad is a classic example too, and Stephen Buhner, same thing. Wonderful healer who's helped so many people, and yet can't help themselves because they can't see their own imbalances, and that's where reflection from community becomes such an important piece. And I think we're entering a new age, and I love this new millennial generation because they're about the connection economy. They're about the interactions, and they're upgrading on each other's kind of that connection. And that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant. It's keeping the secrets back or exposing those secrets and connecting and being vulnerable. And I think that's where we're going.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It also reminds me of, like you mentioned, your father, Stephen Buhner. There's another very well-known famous herbalist who, you and I each respect. And oftentimes, they've done so much of their learning and their knowledge base in previous decades, which is wonderful and it's valuable. But this guy in particular, there were certain areas where, the younger generation, myself, yourself, were kind of maybe a little bit more, we'd kind of tapped into some of the new knowledge. And, I think there can also be a trap too, if you're in that place and not learning from the younger generation or keeping up on top of the new kind of information and where the direction is going. And I remember seeing, going into this guy's store and amazing products, up, top, down, all his shelves were full of the best herbs you could possibly want to get your hands on. And then over in the corner, you could tell it was almost like this kind of, this museum piece from the 80s where, it was, but it wasn't. It was still full on product shelf, and it was a lot of these old school, like, like protein supplements and whatever, right? We're
Right.
kind of caught onto an idea at one point, like soy isoflavon,
Yeah.
protein isolate, like it's like, whoa, big disconnect here. You've kept up with the herbs and this is amazing, but what you did back in 1992 shouldn't be on the shelf anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and there's something about dis-ease that is like it comes from stagnation, right? And so what happens is, and that's why like I love this idea of the intuitive cooking that you have. It's like a recipe is meant to kind of like look at and understand the basis of, and then sort of get intuitive with how you want to work with it. And I remember when you first said that, and I'm going to take a digression here, but I laughed so much. I'm like, intuitive chefing, that means you just like don't even know how to cook or follow a recipe. You just sort of throw things at the pan and hope it works out.
What's that?
But as I played that
Muppets character.
Yeah. As I played with that, I realized, oh, this falls into my same other philosophy that other people could do that bash the same way, which is the flexitarian, which is really this like mutable, flexible, it's okay with a little bit of 80-20 kind of rule and not to beat yourself up over it. There's something brilliant about being flexible and intuitive and in the flow where you can learn from your mistakes easily and you're not stuck and attached to them. And what happens with dis-ease or imbalance in any way is it starts with that stagnation. And stagnation always, like anything, builds friction, which builds heat, which builds inflammation. And all of a sudden, you've got pain, problems, imbalances. And it's, our body's all about homeostasis. So should our health choices. So should our opinions. Yeah. So should our alignment be about like, okay, anything I thought was true will not be true at some point. So I better be able to be okay with that when it becomes.
Yeah, no, totally. I love that. I reference you. I give you credit all the time for that term. It's like my friend Yarrow, he's a flexitarian. That's what I'm into. Yeah, totally. And just like what you're saying, I mean, if like I have been absolutely stagnant in my beliefs, right? Like for the time period that I was vegetarian, then I was vegan, then I was raw vegan, just like very like stuck in my ways, right? I've formed this ideology. I had certain early experiences that affirmed that just made it that much more convinced. But as I held on to them and as I like forced that belief system through my life, like a lot of friction came up. And I love the idea of flexitarian. And I'll be really extreme here in an example. Let's say, we have an opinion about how, I don't know, we choose something really bad, like McDonald's is, right? And maybe this is not the best example because even as a flexitarian, I probably
There's a little McDonald's still in everyone. It doesn't go away.
It's like that Jim Gaffigan skit. Have you ever seen the comedian Jim Gaffigan? He's like, everyone has their own McDonald's. It's like we've all got our own version of that, whatever it is.
Pleasure or whatever that is.
Yeah, so whatever's your McDonald's, right? Like to just even to allow that flexibility of it into your life. Not that you go out seeking it, but let's say you're at the in-laws' house and food's being served or whatever that's maybe not completely in line with your path. Like you're flexible, you can deviate a little bit and you can learn from that. It could be, that wasn't so bad. Or it could be like, oh, I just realized why I don't eat that kind of food, right? That's all learning from experience.
It's all learning. And one way I like to kind of think about that is I think of my body is an ecosystem, right? And we've kind of looked at this and people have looked at this. And if you're new to this idea, you're more bacteria and other cells than you are human, but you're an ecosystem. And so if I build this strong, super ecosystem, for example, I built this beautiful rainforest and in comes, this like white bread, suburban, like diet that just totally doesn't align with that. My ecosystem like either tells me, whoa, get this out of here, get that, or it says, we'll just digest and cannibalize this thing and move on.
Right.
There's no point in beating myself up about it because if I've had like 80% awesome upgrades and really quality intentional nutrition, then that 10 to 20% that is maybe crap, that is maybe even like an ice cream or something or whatever is not going to have that negative effect that it might have at a larger sociological setting.
Right.
People with high levels of candida, yeah, you can't eat sugar. You just gotta stop. But if you've dealt with your sugar cravings and your blood sugar ups and downs, a little ice cream or something is not gonna do you anywhere near the same implications as it would someone else.
Yeah, unless you're neurotic about it, right? Like I was, right? Like, oh, I can't have that, but I'd have it, and just like psychologically, there'd be so much more impact because I'd be freaking out about it.
And that's, you know, the mind over matter piece. But I would say to the benefit of that is having like conviction allows you to search out these new and improved upgrades. You know, like
Yeah.
as much as you might have felt like you were really dogmatic in looking at these different types of health, they've allowed you to have perspective that others who might not look so deeply and get so into a vegetarian, vegan diet, raw food diet, once they come out of that phase, they realize that, okay, uh, I learned something really valuable there.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love your thing about like the 80/20 and putting in that white bread. I'll flip it because a lot of people like the whole new trend is fermented foods. What's old is new again, and it's fantastic. And love that we're all getting into fermented foods. Or, when I first started, it wasn't even fermented foods. It was probiotic capsules. It was like, how can I get these good bacteria in?
Right.
And thank goodness we've moved from capsules to real food. But whether it's capsules or food, you have to think about that terrain, right? Like, is your body made of white bread, sugar, ice cream, all those kinds of things? And you're like, oh, I'll just add in some probiotics, right? I'll add in some sauerkraut. Like, that's a good move. But, the bacteria, you've got to create that environment for them to grow and to thrive. So it's really shifting the whole terrain, in your whole diet as you begin to add in those fermented foods. Otherwise, you put them in and they're just not going to, survive. They'll get cannibalized by the candida.
But sure,
right?
sure. You got like a gut full of gangsters and mobsters. They're like, quick, yuppie, come on, give me your cash. You send in the probiotics. That's that's it. But one brain hook that I think is so invaluable for people to get and know is that cultures cultured their food. All the cultural appropriated diets are from the culturing, the storing, the saving, the preserving. The reason they're like our planet is like over 50% fungi and bacteria by cell count, if we call it. But literally, they will culture everything around us in every different way. And so it's natural for us to develop specific cultures within our gut, in our ecosystem. And that's where that like loss and disassociation is had. Like the flavor umami, which is actually MSG now.
Right.
And but soy sauce is an umami flavor. This was a sixth flavor that was so important, and it often came from cultured foods. It was a cultured flavor, and so we've now swapped that out for chemical MSG on chips. And we've lost such an association following that back. Like all of our common foods now, it's amazing when you look at the history of like ketchup and mustard and relish and like how these were digestives at one point, cultured condiments. And I know you talk lots on this, but I think it's brilliant to take that ancient wisdom and reinfuse it with an understanding of why we have these modern foods and where we can go to get back to quality.
Yeah. And again, that dividing line, like kind of the industrialization, right? Because before then, fermentation, that culturing process, a huge reason why people did it was just literally to preserve their own food. Like, they had a bounty, a harvest, so they needed to culture it, needed to preserve it. And that was one of the preferred methods, for its practical function, but also the flavor it brought in. But yet, once refrigerators were invented, or like the modern like food processor, right? The preservation methods, it became cheaper, easier to can things, to do these other types of food preservation techniques, and hence the culturing of foods kind of slowly worked its way out. And again, like you say, we got to go through these experiences, right? Just like I had to go through all my journeys with different rabbit holes of food. We had to go down this path of almost no cultured foods in our culture to going to the point now. I think we've hit rock bottom with that, and we're all beginning to realize, that wasn't the best idea. Now we're needing to bring this back into our diet. And I love people like Sandor Katz, who fermentation revivalist.
Yeah, and I mean, like you, me, and people watching this video are beginning to, but like I live on Vancouver Island. When I go on the ferry and I watch the lineup and all the burgers going through and the iPads that everybody's like this to, I'm like, man, we got a long ways to go still.
Oh, we do. It's true.
So, this is our cultural narrative that we're bringing forward as a community and as a tribe. And I think it's brilliant. And I invite anybody who's listening or watching this to keep bringing that cultural narrative to your community, because there is a real valid point to increasing our health through our food and looking at the history of it and the future of where we want to go with our nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about resilience. And even though, specifically for me, my journey, which has turned into my kind of passion and vocation, is food, and yours being, food as well, but more primarily herbs. This is our obsession, and if it's
Totally.
yours too, then awesome. Like, power to you. We're gonna love having all these like deep rabbit hole conversations. But if it's not, I mean, it's a part of everyone's journey, and I think my main point is I don't want to take someone as deep down the rabbit hole as I went. You don't have to, right? Like, you can learn from my journey,
Right.
you can learn from Yarrow's journey to support you in doing what you do, because you bring value, whether it's in building or in I mean, you name it.
And it's
Honestly,
it's an innovation too. Like take whatever you glean from this and from other speakers, other presenters, other thought patterns, and again, be the own healer. Innovate, be original. That I think is the lost art in our society that's coming back hugely, is originality in content and new ways of exposing things. That's amazing. And that's what I'm really excited for, to hear what people's new ways of creating a new kind of sauerkraut. Oh, I added sea vegetables, but now I added burdock in, and like what is it that you can innovate on this stuff?
yeah, totally. And a big part of that is, where the uniqueness and where actually the whole food industry is going is back to, from Wall Street to Main Street. We have a friend that's kind of his favorite saying is, it really is. It's this shift back from centralized to decentralized. We're going back to local communities, local systems. And so when you make your sauerkraut, being on the coast, yeah, you might have some, kelp or bladderwrack or whatever that you picked fresh from the ocean, and I might be digging up burdock in my backyard, right? So we can use what's around
Really,
us. Yeah, which is a whole other topic of conversation too. Which one day we should go down that rabbit hole, and local
for
foods and
sure.
foods from our ecosystem, and how that can influence and affect us. So, well, anyways,
Well, the
yeah,
one thing I want to just touch in on that just really quickly is that when you put intention and energy into the food, when you put your own love, your own time, that is probably one of the most healing ways in which you can work with food. Even if it's and so I often, like, say I had somebody making me a sandwich, for example.
yeah,
I don't always eat sandwiches, but if I did, I want to give them lots of praise and thanks, and like, so glad you're making me this amazing sandwich, so they can just be like, yeah, I'm really doing something nice. And then I know I'm getting their loving energy, right? And I think that's a big piece of it. When we garden, when we connect, when we make our own foods, that's just the one thing that I think gets kind of lost in the like nutrition side, is
right,
the power of intention and the energetic kind of vibrational medicine of putting good energy into food.
yeah, no, totally,
So it doesn't have to even be healthy. Let's just
yeah,
put good energy into whatever you do.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's leave it here for now, and you and I are going to have some more conversations in the future. But this has been good, been fun. So tell people where they can reach you. Actually, no, I'm going to tell them where they can reach you. You can go to harmonicarts.ca, check out full, huge, massive selection of amazing, wonderful, top quality herbs, superfoods, medicinal mushrooms. Not only single ingredients, but also the formulas. Yarrow is an absolute master blender in creative formulas. Things like cold defense. Right here we are in January. Everyone's kind of getting bogged down with something, and you're able to come up with formulas based upon your background and your knowledge to create a synergy of herbs, be it for colds, be it for viruses, be it for cholesterol, whatever it is. You have a number of different formulas. They're very well put together to optimally support one through whatever their journey is, and they're very easy to kind of self-navigate, right? If it's parasite purge, right? Like, they're all kind of indicative by the name, so it's a great
Sure.
way to navigate yourself through herbs and formulations, as well as all the single ones. If you really know what you're doing, or you want one specifically, Yarrow's the man to get that from harmonicarts.ca, and you can see his products throughout Canada. You've been reaching out more into the eastern
Huh.
part of Canada, but you're definitely well represented throughout all the great health food stores of Western Canada, and even a little trickle into the States, some stores down there, but you'll ship anywhere,
Yep.
right?
It's amazing. I mean, I just think that people really want to connect and deepen this kind of herbal resurgence of how do we be our own healers. And so, yeah, people have super supported what we do at Harmonic Arts, and I'm just ever thankful and grateful to be able to be of service to help people find that piece of their health. And I just want to thank you too, Malcolm, for putting this kind of thing together and
Yeah.
really having these kind of conversations about nutrition and food. Like, I think they're important, they're really timely, and it's really necessary for us to start to think deeper about how we approach the way we feed this human organism. This thought is ever evolving, and I'm glad you're doing live stuff like this because it can evolve as it grows. Anything that we might have talked about today, next time, might not be quite as amazingly potent as it was then. So let's
Yeah.
just keep evolving. So thank you for sharing this kind of stuff. And what you do at the Light Cellar is amazing as well. I just, probably my favorite health food store in Canada, and I don't say that lightly. Like, it's an amazing place. So if you're in Calgary, Alberta, really, really make a stop to check out the Light Cellar because wow, that is a total upgrade on this evolution of food nutrition. So
Yeah.
thank you, Malcolm.
Cool, and check out our class calendar because we host Yarrow quite regularly. He comes to town, and so he's given all kinds of demos, classes, presentations, as well as I love your new thing. You're on Facebook Live. You're on there quite regularly. You just did a big hour-long thing on the immune system and making it through this kind of cold and flu season. So that was really fantastic, and I think Yarrow has probably the best, YouTube series on all different kinds of herbs. Really fun, very well put together, lots of information and entertaining at the same time. So check out the Harmonic Arts YouTube channel. And if you got any comments, questions, just send them in, and we'll love to hear from you. So thanks for being on the show. We're going to have you back. And
All right.
Okay, right on.
Thanks for having me, Malcolm.
Yeah.
And blessings to all you on your health path. We'll talk with you soon.
Okay.